There is one very important point we're going to go into right now. One very important point. And I'm going to, because we are now masters, you are here. One very important point. It's called the master's sense. The master's sense. You are going to be allowing that in. You're going to then get very confused by it, and then you're going to finally understand it. A few of you already have had it occurring in your life, but you're not sure what it is. Let me explain, if you would, the master sense. Would you write that, Linda, on the board? I'm going to ask Linda to do the writing here. At the very top, capital letters, the master's sense. In order for anything to be sensed, we're going to go back to some basics here. In order for anything to be sensed, you have to have certain qualities. Number one, and write this centered in the middle, and we're going to have about 5 things going down, 5 or 6, centered in the middle. Number one, awareness. You have to have awareness. Now, most people are not aware that you have to have awareness. And before, well, no, truly, some of you were talking before about people becoming even less conscious, closing in, hiding their head in the sand, and they have no sense of awareness. They're not aware at all. Number 2, and just draw an arrow from here and then write the next word. Number 2, in order to be able to sense anything, the second thing that occurs that you have to have is light. Light. L-I-G-H-T. Right centered, right underneath. You have to have light. Light occurs naturally when there is consciousness, the I am awareness. Not mental, but a I am awareness. I exist kind of awareness. That basically emits, radiates light. Not that kind of light, but it's been called the light of passion, the illumination. So you have light. Light comes from what you would call the soul, from awareness. Light emanates out when there is awareness. A person who is aware at even the most basic level, here, the I am level, emits, radiates a light to everyone else. That's why people feel, sense something different with all of you. They don't know what it is. That confounds them. That actually aggravates them. They struggle with it, and they find a way to push it out because it doesn't fit into their nice hypnotic box. So they push it out. But you have light. For those of you who have been in Kihak, are in Kihak, you go back to the creation diagram 101. From here, from light, comes energy. Energy, we've talked about. These are the basics, I know we've talked about, but energy is basically the compassion of the soul that's been so condensed, so brought into itself, that it actually goes through a crystallizing process that turns it into energy. The consciousness was smart enough, aware enough to give itself a means to experience itself, and that is energy. Energy is, as you know from our talks, is neutral, absolutely neutral, until it is activated by passion and desire, not by thought, till it is activated. So the energy then comes to serve the master. Energy is there to serve you, never to work against you, never to be accumulated by you or anyone else. And in here, in this scenario right here, if we had room, you can just write it in there really small. This is where the power dynamic comes in. This has been a problem in creation for a long time, because there are many, many beings on this planet and everywhere else that mistake power for true energy. Power is a saccharine, it's artificial. It does not exist, but there are enough who will not, do not love themselves or honor themselves enough to be in their own energy. They do not consider themselves worthy enough to have their own energy for their own creations, that they take it from someone else. They are unconscious or blind to the fact that there is no power. You don't need energy from anyone else. It's all there for you in, you could say, unlimited quantities. There's plenty. This very little funny thing here, the power dynamic, is what's caused a lot of interesting things to happen all over creation. You've been on the power nipple for a long time, and hey, listen, if Carrie can talk about giving up, you've been seduced by power for a long time. Is that better? Seduced by power for a long time, and you're finally realizing that you don't need it. But a funny thing happens. You get that little gap there that you were talking about before, where you say, okay, I'm going to get off power, but then there's this big gap of void, and suddenly it's like, I have no energy anymore, and I'm losing everything I have. I'm falling into the abyss because I don't have the old power energy. But a funny thing happens, have you ever had that kind of dream where you're falling into a deep, dark hole? My God, what's going to happen? I'm going to die, I'm going to smash and hit bottom, and suddenly, right before you hit, like millimeter before you smash into the ground, suddenly you transform. Suddenly you're not smashing into the ground, or you turn into a big bird and fly away, or you suddenly stop and then rise up. Well, that's what it's been like for a lot of you. You've been on the old power game, and suddenly you get off of it. But you feel like you're falling because, you don't have that old dynamic anymore. But right before you hit bottom, suddenly you realize, I am that I am. This is my light. Nobody else's. This is my energy. Nobody else's. But I digress. Next on the list here going down, next thing you have is what we've been talking about lately. You have, I'm going to call it motion. In here. Motion, next. Motion, I use that word, and it represents time and space and activity and past and future and everything else, because you're actually not moving, as we talked about a couple shouts ago. You're not moving. Everything else is moving through you. But up here, and in every one of your human senses, you've been trained, programmed, hypnotized, whatever, to think that you're moving. It makes you very small when you think that. I have to move against a whole big universe. But you change the perspective, and suddenly you realize everything's moving for you. Everything. It comes to you. If you're not conscious, if you're not aware, or you're not, what you'd say, ready, it's still going to move right through you, but you won't be at that point of connection to utilize it. It'll go right past, but it will come back later. You can't do it wrong. So in order to sense anything, you have to have a degree of awareness. You create automatically and radiate this thing called light. You tap into energy without power, and now there's motion. Now you have a living experience. And from this next one on the bottom, you are able to perceive or sense. Okay, now, so let's take a look at your 5 human senses. These are your sensory mechanisms. I want you to imagine for a moment. Well, go ahead, and you have 5 human senses that are at work almost all the time. Go ahead and close your eyes for a moment. You suddenly lose your sense of vision. Your mind creates its own vision because it's seen through your eyes, so it can recreate pictures in your head. But those pictures in your head, this is such an important point. Those pictures in your head are only an artificial representation of the pictures that have come through your eyes. So when I say apple, you've seen an apple. So your mind creates a visual of an apple, but it's still limited. Imagine for a moment now that you totally lose this sense of sight, your outer vision, your ability to open your eyes and see things around you, and your inner vision. There's no artificial representation of visuals coming through into your brain. You lose it all. Just imagine that for a moment. Don't struggle with it. Just let it be. Life suddenly changes. Life becomes very, very different without vision. And taste. Suddenly you lose that sense of taste. Poof. It goes out the window. You don't have it anymore. Your taste buds stop working. Never taste food again. You'll have a recollection of taste from having tasted cookies and broccoli and hamburgers, or for you vegans, tofu. You'll have a recollection of that, but you never taste again. That sense is gone, along with your vision. And suddenly, you lose that sense of smell. It went out right at about the same time that taste went out. No more smell. Never smell a rose again. You never smell flatulence that Linda was talking about again, so that cancer cure won't work for you. Never smell a spring day with freshness in the air. Never smell your lover, that scent of another person again. You lose that now, along with your taste, along with your sight. Then you lose the sense of touch. The nerve endings of your skin that allow you to feel your body, to feel when you're petting a dog, to feel your hand in water, sensation and a little bit of pressure. Never again able to feel the embrace of another human. You lose that. It's gone. And finally, you lose your sense of hearing. What happens to a person that loses all of their 5 primary senses? They will go crazy. The mind cannot handle it. The mind will try to create new senses. First of all, it will try to get the old ones working. When that doesn't happen, it will try to create new ones, but it'll be too late. You will go crazy if you lose your sensory mechanisms. Go out of your mind. The senses are an extension of your mind. The mind uses those 5 things to gather, interpret, and measure data and create your reality. This is how you live. That and your mind create your reality. This is how you perceive everything, everything all around you. The mind blocks out anything else. The mind blocks out all the other, basically, motions, lights, energies that are going through, because it's not able to perceive it with these 5 senses and itself. This is a very, very important point. You can open your eyes at any time. You do have your sight back. Miracles happen. So, a very important point. Reality is based on the five senses. Everybody uses them. Everybody, even on a spiritual path, a religious path, everyone involved in any type of self-development, personal development, uses these five senses to understand their reality. Let's go back to our analogy of the zoo. If you're in the zoo, you're trapped in the zoo, and you continue to think and sense as an animal, you'll never get out of the zoo. Never will. Because you're using your senses to survive in the zoo, to live in the zoo, to maybe sometimes think about getting out of the zoo, but you become complacent with the zoo. And you use your senses, your animal senses, now exclusively. So you always stay in the zoo, even if they open the gates up. And that's exactly what happens to humans. Five senses, pretty old, pretty rudimentary senses are used to interpret your reality. But there's so much more all around. There's something called the master sense, and it makes no sense to the other senses. Let me illustrate a little bit how this works. The master sense is not dependent on and barely connected to these other senses. The master sense opens up new worlds. But David, you're never going to be able to taste that world or even think into that world or hear that world, because you need a master sense outside of this little reality, not your human senses. They don't work out there, nor really should they work. Your human senses will continue to work in this reality, this environment, but you get into the other, what you would call dimensions, realities, possibilities, and potentials, and they don't work anymore. And that's the tough part. This is the hardest, most challenging of any information I've ever tried to teach soon to be or now masters, because you're going to desperately try to use your five human senses and your mind to interpret something that's already there but cannot be sensed. Let's stop for a moment and stop to consider this. You are a sensory device. Taste, sight, sound, smell, and touch. Remember what we just did? I took those away. What happens? You go crazy. You can't, you're not able to continue to interpret your reality, so you go crazy. In that going crazy, there's a good thing that happens. You go out of your mind. You go beyond the mind. But your body will probably also die as well, because it needs the constant feedback. So let me draw an example. Humans basically live on a linear reality, and their five senses, which I'll just put here as a five, are all acclimated to this very linear reality. This reality is real. It exists. It's here. But everything along this reality line is interpreted by your senses and your mind. Everything. So it's very difficult to get off of this. And the fallacy, the problem with religions and self-development programs is all still using your five senses in your mind to try to figure out how to have a better life. But all you're doing is becoming a better animal in the zoo. That's all. You're still sensing reality from those rather limited human senses. They're linear. They're very linear. You're still trying to interpret life from that. The master sense gets out of all that. The master sense is not tied into the brain or the human or the physical. But humans still try to do this, and they go both ways with it. They try to interpret the past and the future, and it's very linear. It stays the same, and it begets more sameness until somebody comes along, somebody like Walter Russell, like all of you, says, no, there's something different. I know there's something different, but damn it, every time I try to figure it out, every time I try to sense it, there's nothing there. See, that's the frustration. You know it's there, but you're trying to use your 5 rather crude senses and your brain to figure it out. Doesn't work. What to do? It's such a frustrating, but how else do I do it? That's what I have. I have 5 senses. I've got my mind, how to do it. Well, before we get into that, I want you to realize something. That this is linear. This is a motion, which includes time, space, all the rest of it. Motion and time-based reality interpreted through the senses. But as we speak right now, there are other movements, other dimensions, other things happening. It's not linear. You just don't have the sense to understand what's happening there. And the same token, you have your mathematics. And this is a good example, mathematics. And it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and -1, -2, -3, -4. But, you're right. By the way, you realize it hasn't been that long ago in history since they even figured out there was a 0. No, really. I mean, that was a big revelation. Whoa, there's a 0. And the person who said that was beheaded the next day. It's a good story. Well, all right, 2 days later. Why? Because it disrupted the current thinking. How could there be a 0? We start at 1. And it wasn't until a long time later they figured out, oh, yeah, there is a 0. And then the poor person that came up with negative numbers. How can you have negative numbers? They were just imprisoned and then tortured. And then later on, oh, yeah, there are negative numbers. Well, there's also numbers that go this way. And some of you really smart ones are going, I don't think so, Adamus. Yeah, there is. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4 that go that way. And numbers that go this way, and numbers that go that way and that way. But when you're sensing only linear, only local, and only mental, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it. And when you try to use your current senses to get here and everywhere else, there's a 4 up there. I get so excited where we're going. When physicists and scientists have finally come to understand that when you combine this 4 with this 4, and this 4 appears in a totally different reality, totally different dimension that cannot be sensed, but it's there. When they figure that out, that's going to provide the bridge or the pathway to understanding true quantum physics. Right now, they're muddling around in quantum physics. They're trying to understand it through their current senses. Once they figure out that a 4 here and a 4 here and a 4 back here and 1 over down here, you start linking those together. Now you've got real exponential expansionness, evolution. Right now we have evolution kind of plodding along linear based on 5 senses. It's slow and it's not going to work anymore. It's going to be disrupted this year. And the disruption is going to cause a lot of hell. Whoever comes out with theories about mathematics in different dimensions is going to be laughed at, as Walter Russell was laughed at for so many of the things that he came out with. But we find out later they're real. So it goes to say that 5 senses and a mind, you're not going to get to where you're trying to get to, enlightenment, realization, by using those. So How do you get there? That's the frustrating thing. That's what so many of you have been wondering about lately. It's the frustration and the passion. How do we get there? It's very simple. We go back to something very, very basic. It is, oh, Linda's going to criticize. It is, if you would write Awareness 101, write that across the top, Awareness 101. What is that? I exist. I exist. I've been asking you for years now to feel it, not to think it, but to feel I exist. A lot of you have gotten bored because you keep thinking about it. You keep trying to make it into something that it's not necessarily. You keep trying to sense it with your mind, and you wait to, well, I haven't gotten the tingling all over my body, or I don't see it. I don't see. No, you're not going to. It is the master's sense that understands it. It's nothing like the 5 human senses. It's nothing like the mind. When Walter had his epiphany, he tried to write about it. He wrote about it a little bit, but he was actually very mental. And even his books don't express it. And he gave the disclaimer in his books and said, how can one write about something that the mind simply does not understand? I know I experienced it, he said. And he did. But I cannot describe it, because he was trying to describe it in sensory terms and mental terms that are very, very limited. So he couldn't write about it. What do you do, though? The master sense. How do you get there? Go back to Awareness 101. Right underneath there, I exist. It's not a thought. It is a knowingness. It's not a mantra or a meditation. It is an awareness. I told you way back when you're going to get sick and tired of me talking about it, because you want some Shazam, some magic. You want something that titillates your 5 human senses. The only thing that you think you know right now. You go back to the I exist. The I am awareness. The master's sense, which is so difficult to try to teach, but very easy to experience. And suddenly, you go exponential. You have knowingnesses that you don't know how or why you have them. Suddenly, you are beyond time and space. And suddenly you realize what I've been talking about for years, that suddenly the future is just here. What is unresolved in this moment is resolved in another dimension, and suddenly it's here. It always has been, you realize, but you've been missing it because you've been only sensing through those 5 senses in the mind. When one opens up to the master sense, which is not singular, but we're not going to break it down in mental terms. We're not going to try to diagram it, and don't ever try to do that. Once the master sense opens up and it is accepted and allowed, and you keep your frickin' hands and your ears and your eyes and everything else off of it, because you don't try to turn it into a human sense. Once you allow it, once you let yourself go crazy enough to realize that it's there, once you don't think about it and try to construct it in your brain or see it with your eyes, once you just realize it's there, everything changes. Game changes. And that's what 2016 is going to bring. And that's the disruption and the beauty of it all. This is the most challenging of anything to be taught, because it takes a long time for somebody to get here. It really does. You take somebody off the street leading a normal, regular, relatively unconscious life. You take them, and you can't just bring them in here. As I heard Calder and Linda's story about their interviewing, and what seems so obvious and sensible to you, to somebody else, blow them up. I mean, their body, their mind, everything else. It takes a long time to get to this point. A lot of words over many years and a lot of channels to get to this point. And now we're here, and in a way, I really can't teach you it. I can tell you it's there. I can tell you the master's sense. The mind is going to say, but what is it? Where does it come from? How big is it? How can I make it better? I want it right now in my life. I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. Okay. That's where I said at the beginning of the day, you're going to smash into the wall until you just do what? Allow. Absolutely. And you're ready. And you can't do it wrong. Actually, you're not going to be able to escape it. That's the funny thing. It's going to be here for each and every one of you. I'm going to kind of break my own rules. But, you know, if you make the rules, you can break the rules, they say. And I'm going to play a little Merabh music. And we're going to simply allow the master's sense. And your mind will say, but what is it? Where is it? Your senses will try to feel it, and they can't. And then you get real quiet. Let's take a good deep breath into the master's sense. This is where we're going. You have 5 human senses. We're going to go beyond. We're going to take a 90-degree sharp turn. 90-degree turn along the path and realize if there are 5 human senses, there are 5 unsenses, or 15, or 1,000, or just one. Let's have some Merabh kind of music on, John. Let's have the house lights down. If the pizza guy walks in, invite him to sit in with us. Give him a nice tip. Take a good deep breath. Mwah. I love all of you. I really do. I've been waiting, dreading coming to this point. Dreading, she says, why dreading? Oh, this is a hard one to teach. Something that you can't sense in your mind or with your fingers, or can't smell it. Can't see it. Can't hear it. We got the music, but take a good deep breath. I've been dreading it in a way. I've been saying to myself, am I good enough to teach this? Am I a master enough amongst the ascended masters to teach us? Could Kuthumi do a better job? Maybe Tobias shouldn't have left so early. Maybe he should have taught this. El Moria, he's so handsome. They'd listen to him. And then I woke up out of my bullshit dream and said, of course I can teach this. Just like every one of you. Wake out of that bullshit dream, okay? That's true. I said I'm not going to be politically correct. It takes too much effort. Oh, and by the way, you know it, don't you? I know it. There's so much more. There's so much more that you're not going to sense it with the things you've been used to working with, and you can't even think your way into it. That was dear Walter's problem. He tried to think his way through it. He had such good information, but it got so mental, and I said, Walter, shut up. Allow. The master sense. I guess you could say it's intuitive, it's knowing, it's simple. You realize that vocabulary is a limited sense. Just like those other human senses are so limited. So we get to this point. It's just all about allowing. Now, it's okay to think. It actually is, because you can't help it. And you're going to wonder, did you do it right? Later on, you're going to wonder, how do I bring that back? You don't. Remember what we talked about before. Creation is in motion. You're not. You just let it come to you. Just let it come to you. Let's go even a step or two back, further back. Remember, I've said that realization is a natural unfolding. It's an effortless unfolding. Take that sharp right turn into effortless. Get off that linear path into absolute effortless. I'd like to make a little resolution right here as we go into this year, that every time you think you have to apply effort to your realization, to your mastery, mental, physical, emotional, we simultaneously take a 90-degree turn into effortless. You do both. And you feel that effortless. You feel how somehow this master sense, no, I'm not going to call it the sixth sense, and don't you either, because that's staying linear. But suddenly you realize it's always been there. It just wasn't being sensed. It wasn't being awared, if that's a word, realized. A while back I said, let's replace the word ascension with enlightenment. I said, let's replace enlightenment with realization. What is realization? Well, it's just, sensing. But beyond the 5 human senses, beyond what you've been used to. Remember I said that this year is going to be really disruptive. Disruptive meaning we're going to disrupt that addiction or seduction to the 5 human senses. And don't be surprised if, let's say your hearing gets a little wacky, or your eyes seem to, not work like they did before, whatever. All I'm saying is we're disrupting some old patterns. You're not going to replace your current human vision with supervision, like bionic supervision. It's not about that, because then you're still in linear. We're going to allow this thing that I call the master sense, a way different way of realizing. It's not mental either. That's the beauty of it. It's the best thing about it. Master sense is not mental. It's not a new way of thinking. Master sense is totally off the old charts. There's no effort whatsoever. No effort. There's no beckoning or begging. Remember, your light causes energy to go into motion, to come to you. just up to you to receive. Seems a little odd at first. That's very understandable. When there's that desire to use your senses or your mind to figure it out, it's a little odd just to be effortless, allowing. You even try to do mental exercises of expanding. You imagine yourself pushing yourself out, making your mind or whatever bigger. Those don't work either. We're going into something totally out of the realm of the current senses. And I include mind as a sense. Totally out of that realm. And it's just for you to allow, to receive. I don't care how good or bad you've been, how smart, how stupid, man or woman, 5 lifetimes or 500, it doesn't matter. No effort, please. I know it feels strange, but there's no push force here. The master sense. It's almost indescribable. It's beyond current physics and science and math. They'll get there. Others have used different names for it. I like the master sense. Others have tried calling it different things. It doesn't matter. It's beyond the way you currently detect, measure, and evaluate the life around you. The master sense. It will change your life. It will set you free of that zoo. And you don't ever, ever, ever have to worry about going back. Be in this effortless moment for yourself. Take a good deep breath. I was so confounded when my master sense came to me permanently. You know, I'd had some bits and pieces of it, some awarenesses of it, but when it was there, I really tried to make it fit in with everything else. I tried to make it fit into my mind, and it just wouldn't. I tried to make it fit into my human senses, which is all I really knew at the moment, but they wouldn't. So I finally stopped trying. And then, and only then, did the light of my master sense really shine. Then and only then. When I stopped trying. Master sense contains no power whatsoever. It moves energy to it in a very different way. It moves energy to it, to you. What I call grace, ease. But I remember I tried using my force, my push, my kind of that whole dynamic of cause and effect as part of linear reality. I tried it, didn't work. It's okay, you're not doing it wrong if your mind is chattering away. If you're trying to see it, you're not doing it wrong, but let's also take that 90-degree turn at the same time. There's anti-push-pull, anti-gravity, anti-senses. That's what we're allowing. The master sense is not human. We're no longer animals in the zoo. Take a good deep breath. See how easy it is? The funny thing is, and some of you are saying, but nothing's happening. No, not with your human senses. It's not. Nor do you want it to. You say, but then how do I know something's happening? Because you're allowing it. You may not feel it in the old way or think it in the old way. It's kind of like that old Zen thing. How do I know I'm here? Because I am. How do I know that master sense is here? Because it is. Couldn't be any simpler than that. Well, but I don't have to work for it. Only if you want to. How do I know what this master sense is, you might say? Because you've always had it. How do I know that I'm not just making it up? You make up everything. You just got hypnotized into making up your life the same as everybody makes up their lives. You got one great big F up, make up. It's all made up. So why not make up? Well, allow what you really are, what you really want. I'm getting so hungry. It's effortless, the master's sense. It's here. Nobody's being denied of it. If you're frustrated about it, where is it? I can't feel it. That's all right. And you take a deep breath and allow. Remember that 90-degree sharp turn off of Linear Boulevard onto Fantasy Lane. That's a shortcut over to Enlightenment Highway, which eventually leads to realization. Okay, take a good deep breath. Take a good deep breath, dear Shambhala. Take a good deep breath. Well, I guess I did teach it. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the Ascended Masters Club tonight and say, damn right. Yeah, I knew they'd get it. I knew it was time. So, my dear friends, we're going to continue with this. We have a lot of things going on for this year, the obvious. We have so much to do, but we go off in this other direction now. It's going to seem strange, unreal at times. Is it really there? Is it really tangible? But remember, it's not just about that 5-sensed linear life anymore. You're never going to get to an Enlightenment Boulevard that way. Never. So we allow the other perspectives, not just the physical perspective. We allow all the other perspectives to start coming in. It's going to feel weird. I grant you that. It's going to definitely feel weird. But then you're going to come around understanding this is so natural. And to be that animal in the zoo for so long was actually the unnatural state. So let's take a deep breath with that, and you know how we're going to end this. You know we're going to take a deep breath together and say, Happy New Year! Happy New Year. And all is well in all of creation. Thank you, my dear friends. May the Master's sense be with you.